welcome everyone to the September 2025 edition of the Ag Economic Dialogue session. Today we've got a couple presentations. Han Lee is going to talk about some farm expenses and trends that direction. I believe I didn't get the title right at all. Sorry, Han. She'll tell you what she's going to talk about, and then I will wrap up with some of our estate planning and farm transitions conversations as the second part of today's show. So with that, I will turn it over to Han. She can tell you what she's really going to talk about because I've been in a fluster this morning. So with that, the show is yours.
Thanks, Heather. Let me share the screen. Okay. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for attending the September Ag Economics Dialogue today. My name is Hoanh Lee. I'm the Assistant Professor and SDSU Extension Economic Research Specialist. And today I'm going to talk about the Midwest from financial performance over time. I think this is a topic that many of us may interest given the current conditions. So here's the roadmap of my talk. First, I will give an introduction, and then I will talk about the graph from financial performance over time, where I discuss the data and the financial measurement and ratio I'm using. Next, I will provide a discussion and conclude at the end. So let me start with the introduction. As I mentioned earlier, graph from financial performance may be a topic that many of us pay attention to given the current condition. So what are the current conditions? Crop price have declined since 2023. If you look at this graph, it shows the price received for corn by month from the USDA NAS from 2016 to 2025. With the latest data is, I believe, this July 2025. Some price were peaked in 2022, mid-2022, with the price was about $7 per bushel. Since then, corn price declined significantly to late 2023, where corn price hang around $4.50 per bushel. But it didn't stop there. It continued to decline till the late of 2024, where corn price hang around the low end of $4 and the high end of $3. In 2025, corn price improved a little bit. Between February 2025 and June 2025, corn price was about $4.50 per bushel. And the latest data we have here is July 2025, where corn price about $4.29 per bushel. So corn price declined significantly from mid-2022, the high of 2022 to 2025. This graph shows the price of received for soybean by month also come from the USDA NAS. Soybean price were peaked in 2022 with a price above $16 per bushel. Since then, soybean price declined significantly, and as of 2025, soybean price hang around the low end of $10. Wheat price also softened as well. With the declines in crop price, crop farm revenues has been shrinking. Interest rates have increased in recent years, would make the borrowing costs become more expensive. Input costs increased in 21 and 22 due to the supply chain issue and the inflation. Since then, input costs declines a little bit, but it still remain elevated. Crop farmers also face uncertainty from policies such as tariff, trade war. The USDA forecast released on September 3rd project crop cash receipts will continue to decline in 2025. This graph released on September 3rd, 2025, plot the U.S. farm sector cash receipts, and USDA projected that the cash receipts for all commodities increase in 2025. However, that increase comes entirely from the animal and animal product cash receipts. Crop cash receipts continue to decline in 2025. If this forecast is realized, that means crop cash receipts continue to decline in 3 years in a row from 2023. Crop farm producers have experienced an agricultural economics downturn, which involves greater financial challenge and risk on crop farms. It also raised concerns about financial health of the farm sector. Therefore, it is important to examine the financial health of crop farms. Next, I will discuss the crop farm financial performance over time, starting with the data. So the data I'm using in this project come from the Farm Financial Management Database of FinBin from the University of Minnesota. The sample includes 318 crop farms that have data every year from 2010 to 2024. Between 2010 and 2024, we experienced several commodity price cycles. From 2010 to 12, where commodity price cycle was on the increasing trend with the price peak in 2012. And then from 13 to 2019, where commodity price was on the declining trend. From 2020 to 2022, where commodity price on the increasing trend with the peak in 2022 and commodity price decline again in 2024 and 2023 and 2024. The 9 Midwest states include Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, Ohio, South Dakota, and Wisconsin. I divide the sample of 318 farms into 4 groups based on their crop farm income in 2010. The very small farms has crop farm income of less than or equal to 250,000. Small farm has crop farm income between 250,000 and 500,000. Medium farm has crop farm income between 500,000 and $1 million, and large farm has crop farm income above $1 million. Then I examine the financial performance of those crop farms over time based on their farm size. The 5 financial measurement and its expected financial ratio I consider including the liquidity, solvency, profitability, efficiency, and repayment capacity. I'm going to go into detail about those financial measurement and financial ratio in the next couple of slides, so please bear with me. Let's start with the first measure, what is the liquidity measure? What measures the ability of a farm business to generate sufficient cash flow to meet its short-term debt obligation. A common measure of liquidity is the current ratio, calculated as the current assets divided by current liability. A higher current ratio is preferable. That means a farm business has either higher current assets or lower current liability. This graph shows the current ratio over time by 4 groups of farms from 2010 to 2024. As we can see here, the current ratio moved in unison with the commodity price cycle, with the increasing trend from 2010 to 2012, peak in 2012 with align with the commodity price peak in 2012. And then it's on declining trend from 2013 to 2019, on increasing trend again between 2020 to 2022, where commodity price also peaked in 2022 before it declined in 23 and 24. The current ratio for the very small farm tend to be lower during the bad time or during the downturn. Also, the current ratio tend to be diverse during good year and tend to converge during bad year. In 2024, as you can see here, the current ratio decreased substantially from the high of 2022. It's equal to, for the small, medium, and large, the current ratio is about 2, which means for every dollar that those farms have, they have about $2 in assets to cover that dollar of debt. For the very small farm, it's about 1.6. That means the very small farm has about $1.6 to cover for $1 of debt. It's half. The next measure is the solvency measure, which measures the ability of a farm business to satisfy its debt obligation when due. A common measure of solvency is the debt to asset ratio, what is calculated as the total liability divided by total assets. The debt to asset ratio also can be seen as the leverage ratio, what is the share of total assets is financed by debt. A lower debt to asset ratio is preferable. That means the farm either have lower liability or is have higher total assets. This graph shows the debt to asset ratio over time for the four group of farm. The four group of farm in generally it have a declining trend from 2010 to 2024, with the debt to assets was above 30% in 2020 declined to about 26-27% in 2024. The very small farm consistently has the highest debt to assets over time. For example, in 2010, their debt to assets is about 36%, which means 36% of their total assets are financed by debt, and this number declined to 27% in 2024. Just give you some reference, even those Midwest crop farm has declining trend in debt to assets over time, which means their solvency position is improving from 2010 to 2024. But their debt to assets is much higher compared to the US farm sector. This graph shows the debt to asset ratio of the US farm sector. In 2010, the US farm sector debt to asset ratio below 13% compared to the Midwest crop farm was above 35%. And in 2025, what is the forecast here? The debt to asset ratio for the US farm sector is about 13.40%. And in 2024, it's about 13.36%. So it's increasing a little bit, but it's still substantially lower compared to the Midwest crop farm. The next measure we consider is the profitability measure, which measures the ability to generate returns from production inputs and assets investment. Common measure for profitability, including the rate of return on assets or ROA and operating profit margin ratio. The rate of return on assets is calculated as the income from operation, subtract the value of unpaid labor and management, divided by the average farm assets. The income from operation can be calculated at the gross farm income, subtract the total operating expense. And if we take the income from operation, subtract the interest expense, we will get the net farm income, which is another measure of profitability. Higher rate of return on assets is preferable. That means the farm is productive and efficient in using its assets to generate profit. This graph shows the rate of return on assets for four groups of farms from 2010 to 2024. So we can see here, the four group of farm has rate of return on assets move in unison with the commodity price cycle. And the patterns are very similar for the four group, would reflect the impact of the commodity price on the rate of return on assets or on farm profitability. After the high in 2012, rate of return on asset declined from 2013 to 2018 before its increase from 2019 to 2022. Then it started declining again in 23 and 24. In 2024, the rate of return on assets for all group of farm ran between 2.2 to 2.5% compared to above around 10% in 2022. So the rate of return on asset declined significantly from the high of 2022. The other measure for profitability is the operating profit margin ratio. What can be seen as the share of gross farm income, that's the profit. The operating profit margin can be calculated as the income from operation minus the value of unpaid labor divided by the gross revenue instead of the average total assets like the rate of return on assets. Higher value of operating profit margin is more favorable. This graph shows the operating profit margins over time by these four groups of farm. The operating profit margins also move in unison with the commodity price cycle, but it just a little bit fluctuates compared to the rate of return on assets. If we look at 2024, the operating profit margin declined significantly from the high of 30% to about 10% for the small, medium, and large farm. For the very small farm, this number is about 5%. The next measure we consider is the efficiency measure, which measure how efficiently of a farm using its assets to generate income, and it also indicates where $8 of income generated has been spent. A common measure for efficiency is the operating expense ratio, which is calculated at the total operating expense, subtract the depreciation, and divide by the gross revenue. Lower value of operating expense ratio is preferable. That means farm spend less dollar amount to generate less dollar amount of expense to generate $1 of income or revenue. This graph shows the operating expense ratio over time for those four groups of farms. The operating expense ratio tend to be low during good years and tend to be high during bad years. From 2010 to 2012, the operating expense ratio hang around between 55% to 63%. That means farms spend 55 to 63 cents to generate $1 in revenue. During 2012 to 2019, that number is about 75 to 80%. That means farms spend about 75 cents to 80 cents to generate $1 in revenue. And look at this number in 2024. For the very small and small farm, the operating expense ratio is about 90%. That means the very small and small farm had to spend 90 cents in order to generate $1 of income. For the large and medium farm, this number is about 82 to 84%. So it's a little bit better compared to very small and small, but it's substantially high compared to the previous 2021 and 22. So this is the combination of the low commodity price and high input costs. The last measure we consider here is either repayment capacity, which measures the ability of a farm business to pay its debt on time. A common measure of the repayment capacity is the term debt coverage ratio, which is calculated as the debt repayment capacity divided by the principal and interest. The debt repayment capacity can be calculated as the net farm income from operation plus the interest expense plus depreciation. Higher term debt coverage ratio is preferable. That means farm has higher ability to pay their debt on time. This figure shows the term debt coverage ratio over time by farm size. In general, farm has higher term debt coverage ratio during good year and has lower term debt coverage during bad year. And in 2024, this number, the term debt coverage of four group of farm declined significantly from the 21 and 22. That indicates the significant decline in the farm repayment capacity. So let's move to the discussion. So what do those measurements tell us about the crop farms in the 9 Midwest states between 2010 and 2024? Therefore, all crop farms in the 9 Midwest states have stronger liquidity position during good year and weaker liquidity position during the downturn. The debt to asset ratio declining over time, with the ratio falling to less than 27% in 2024 from over 31% in 2010. That means the farm solvency position for the Midwest crop farm is improving over time. However, remember this number is substantially higher compared to the US farm sector. Profitability follow a similar pattern across different farm size. That means there is no evidence that the larger farm is doing better compared to the smaller farm in terms of return on assets or operating profit margin. Farm operating expense tend to decrease during good year and increase during bad year. And in 2024, this number increased substantially, with the small and very small farm had to spend about 90 cents in order to generate $1 in income. For the medium and large, this number is about 82 to 84 cents to generate $1 of income. So this is, again, is a combination of high input cost and low commodity price. Prepayment capacity declined significantly for all groups of crop farm during the poor year. And this declined significantly in 2024 compared to the high of 2023. The Midwest crop farm operated on a much tighter profit margin, with the high operating expense in 2023 and especially in 2024. Let me conclude here. We examine the financial performance of different sides of crop farm from 2010 to 2024. The sample we use include 318 crop farms from 9 Midwest states. We obtained the data from Farm Financial Management Database, or the FinBin data, from University of Minnesota. All 5 financial measures, including liquidity, solvency, profitability, efficiency, and repayment capacity, move in unison with the price cycle. During the good year, farm has high liquidity, solvency, profitability, and repayment capacity, along with low operating expense. So when it's good, and when it's bad, it gets worse. This small farm has quicker liquidity and solvency compared to the other farm side. However, smaller farm are not disadvantaged in terms of profitability, efficiency, or repayment capacity compared to the larger farm. And this is my contact information. If you have any question, I'm happy to answer it now, or you can send me an email or call me with any question. Thank you for listening.
Super. Thanks, Han. Any questions from the audience? Now's your time to ask them. Otherwise, we will do questions at the end as well.
Heather, I've got a question. Just a clarification for Han. Did you include interest expense in income from operations or not? You're muted.
Yes. So the income from operation will not include the interest expense. If you take the income from operation and you subtract the interest expense, you will get the net farm income.
Okay, because the Farm Financial Guidelines switched their recommendation back in 2017. So it's excluded today, but in the early sample period, depending on how it was calculated, we'd want to make sure that it was included or excluded consistently throughout. So thank you.
It's excluded. Yep. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to kick off my start of the presentation by apologizing to you all. I lost my presentation. It is nowhere on my computer that I could find for about 60 minutes of searching today. However, I did it in a different format and had recorded my presentation for a different audience a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to share that with you. And it's what I was going to give live, except it'll be recorded voices instead. And then I've got some extra things from the B cubed or triple B, or however you want to abbreviate the big beautiful bill, just to talk about some of the estate planning and some of the tax laws and rules that maybe changed through there that you should probably be thinking about or looking at. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. And we will try to push play on this video, and hopefully, I mean, it'll give you all the information. It's just not me talking live, it's the recorded version. So with that, we'll play this and ask some questions and clarifying information at the end. One of the big things I want to talk about is that there's one big process that usually gets covered in the estate plan conversation, and a couple of the other things that are missed or not usually discussed as we're talking about this plan. So today I'm going to cover both the estate plan, the transition plan, and also the retirement plan. The estate plan is the one we hear a lot about. This one comes with estate tax consequences, and it's the way assets are transferred to heirs when the owners have died. The transition plan is an important part of the plan as it provides the framework for how the next generation will return to the family operation. The part of the plan that's commonly forgotten about is the retirement plan. At some point, the older generation will not be as active in the daily activities of the farm or ranch. They may need additional health care. They may also need to live their lives in a comfortable home and in a consistent lifestyle. All of these plans are the basic needs of keeping the family a cohesive unit and keeping the farm very sustainable. An understanding of all the plans to all the heirs and how it will affect them will help ensure everyone understands the plan, even if they don't 100% like the plan. Communication is the key to accomplishing that goal. If we talk about the most frequently discussed components, we'll start with the estate plan. Everyone has an estate plan. It may not be the plan we want. However, all the assets have a distribution method tied to them. We call them the estate planning COPs. Let's take a look at all the components of the COPs next. C is for contract and is the first way assets are distributed. Contracts can be found in any policies or accounts that have a beneficiary tied to them. Items like life insurance policies or retirement accounts have a beneficiary designation. This is important because you may have listed your sister, for example, as a beneficiary when you first bought the policy 30 years ago. But since then, you've had 4 kids, and you thought saying in your will that the money from the insurance gets split amongst your children would be sufficient. However, the contract will prevail and the funds to your sister will have occurred before your will is even written. Even read. This may further affect a farm operation if the policy was to help a returning heir buy the farm from their siblings, pay off a debt, or if the funds from a retirement or investment account are supposed to go to the non-farming heirs. The good news is that the beneficiary documents can be easily updated to accomplish the goals of the family. Ownership is the O of the COPs and is the second step in asset distribution. Any asset with a title has a transfer distribution plan. Titles can represent ownership transfer between joint owners, can indicate an ownership by a trust or a business entity, and those two items include a distribution plan when they were written. Careful use of titles should be part of the estate plan. Mistitling of bank accounts can lead to the misdistribution of the assets at the death of the owner. For example, a child may be added to an account as a signer, but if done incorrectly and the paperwork says they are an owner, any cash left in those accounts would go to that child. Additionally, using transfer on death or TOD designations makes that other person an owner of the asset. This opens the asset up to issues in the case of divorce, bankruptcy, some types of disagreements, or any lawsuits brought against that other owner. Given these examples, it's important that titles are reviewed for accuracy and the proper distribution. The final distribution method is probate. Probate is a legal proceeding that occurs before a judge to final the estate of the landowner in our case. Probate basically occurs in two instances: if you die with a will or without a will. The catch is what happens during those two options. If you pass away without a will, it is called dying intestate. And in this case, assets are distributed to your heirs, but without any direction from you or regards to your wishes. Generally, all assets will be divided equally amongst the heirs surviving, which may lead to the sale of these assets because we need to determine what equal is, and this is the only way to be 100% sure everyone gets their equal distribution. The other way is to have a will in combination with updated and correctly designated beneficiaries on life insurance accounts and other accounts, and to correctly title assets that clearly designate the distribution of those cash and investments. Assets in the form of land, machinery, or if you have a list of personal items you want distributed into specific individuals should be included with part of your will designation. Thus, you can be sure there are a lot of moving and important parts to this estate plan if you think about the contracts involved, the titles that might need to be changed, and the probate process. The living part of the transition plan is often missed when we decide the next generation will come back to the farm. Conversations and planning for where the child will live, who will pay for those, and the housing and the way they will be paid are important conversations to have. We should also talk about what benefits are included. This may include mom making dinner, a quarter of beef in the fall, maybe the farm pays for the purchase or the upkeep on a house, and maybe a vehicle is provided for personal and work use. We also want to have a discussion on workload expectations in this transition plan, and it needs to be written out and discussed so everyone understands what the plan is. If we talk about the management part of the transition plan, management changes are also important, as many farmers and ranchers do not easily give up control of the farm or ranch that they've been operating. Decision-making authority becomes an issue when the next generation do not have any input and feel they are nothing but a hired man. Other times, the older generation feels like their experience isn't respected because the child wants all the authority and decision-making components. Communication and empathy are important parts to this part of the succession process. Another area of contention arises when timelines for the transition are developed but not followed. An example timeline could be that the child and parent work together for a short period of time. In this example, you can see it's 10 years that they would be working together, and then the younger generation takes over. Or maybe the plan is for 30 years of joint operation. So the transition of management requires more conversation, better communication methods, and making communication a priority. The decision on how long each family works together is going to require some communication about the current health standard situation of each of the members involved, maybe depending on the starting age of the older generation and their current goals for retirement or other things to do as a second or third career. Problems arise when the timeline isn't followed. Management isn't transferred as planned. This could be due to an upgrade in machinery, as it's now easier to farm in new equipment with smart technology versus open cabs on tractors when we were cultivating maybe 2 or 3 times per summer. Keep in mind the words of one of my coworkers: "He who has the checkbook has all the control." And if this transfer doesn't happen, control of the operation and decision-making does not transfer either. So we need to make sure that this is an important part of our plan. During the transition plan is when the transfer of asset ownership can also be discussed. Will the ownership happen during the life of the owner or wait until their death? There's many ways that the ownership transition can happen, and I have some examples listed here. Which of these tools are used to transfer the ownership will rely on the goals of the family. Some of those considerations are listed. First and foremost, and often talked about, are the tax consequences that we need to consider, whether relating to capital gains, estate taxes, gift taxes, step up in basis, and other considerations. Control of the operation is another consideration. When will that transition of the control over decision-making related to the ground happen and occur? And a big component are the income needs of both generations farming together. Land rent, product sales are a couple of the income sources, as well as income from the sale of land that needs to be discussed. The goals of the operation need to be considered when choosing the tool used to transfer ownership. As we move next into the retirement plan, again, we need to think about health, funding, and living. This final plan is often the one most often left out, mainly because farmers and ranchers consider retirement as a naughty word. However, funding, health, and living considerations of this plan are important for a successful transition and estate plan to occur. Many times retirement isn't considered because, quote, I'm going to die in the tractor seat or in the saddle, depending on where you're at. That is the retirement plan. However, with life expectancy continuing to climb, this part of the plan is a bigger and more important need every day. One of the first things we need to consider is where will the money come from when you are no longer able to be involved in the daily activities of the farm? Most of the farm's income is reinvested directly into the operation. But we need to think in terms of rental income, self-funded retirement accounts, Social Security income, and other sources to answer this question. These answers help guide the transfer of ownership decision-making. Another consideration is healthcare needs, including long-term care needs. This is a big concern for many farm and ranch families, as long-term care expenses can run $10,000 to $12,000 a month. And this is a huge financial obligation and burden on the family farm that can be financially draining. Long-term care insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, and health insurance are all part of this conversation, and the use or non-use of these tools will help direct the need for retirement fund planning and also drive the ownership decisions. A third consideration is the future living location for all family members. Will the older generation move off the farm so the next generation can live by the cattle facilities or the grain bins? Or will another house be built for the child returning to the farm operation? Another thing we need to consider is aging in place. Does the old farmhouse need to be adapted so the door frames can accommodate walkers and wheelchairs? Does the bathroom have a shower that's accessible when walkers and wheelchairs are needed? Again, funds needed for any of these decisions also need to be part of the planning process. As I mentioned, many aren't planning on retiring. Acceptance of this as a probable situation needs to occur so that this third step and this third piece of the farm plan can be fully accomplished and worked through. In this presentation, I covered the differences in the three parts of this full farm plan, and I also covered some of the financial timeline and tools to use that are available for farmers and ranchers. If you have any questions on these plans, here's my contact information. Please reach out and I'd be happy to assist you or a family you are working with as they move through the process. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Okay, well, there was my presentation in a completely different format than what I was going to plan on giving it to you today. But that was the basic information and the concepts behind some of the estate planning conferences, topics that we present on throughout the winter programmings that I have coming up. Some other things I want you to be thinking about as you look at and consider your estate plan, transition plan, or retirement plan, since there are those three different pieces, are some of the changes and the updates that the BBB brought forth. So there were some changes to the federal exemption limits and some of the yearly gifting exemptions. So there was some dollar changes and some freezes to those numbers. There were some changes to FSA eligibility rules that might affect how you set up a triple LP or something like that as a part of your business entity selection, so that you're not missing out on potential FSA payments due to limitations on a per person basis. So you might want to be looking at some of those types of things and considerations as well. An interesting capital gains tax rule change. They're going to spread any capital gains tax that you might incur if you sell the farm ground or the ranch land to an eligible farmer or rancher. They can spread that capital gains over 4 years, thus maybe reducing the amount in total that you'd be paying because your income would be at a different level and it would change different things. So again, something else to consider and take into keep in mind, especially if you don't have heirs returning to the farm and you're selling to off-farm individuals, or if you're selling to your heirs in order so that you have money to fund some of your retirement and healthcare needs as you get older, that might be something else that you want to consider there. Another big component, the income tax changes on Social Security, and not taxing Social Security as income might be a big thing for people to look at if you're getting close to taking Social Security as part of your income, or if you're currently in that process. So something else to think about. And we don't talk a lot about the 529 education plans often in some of our conversations, but there's another changes in some of those things that might be of interest to you. So I guess my long and short part of this story is the BBB did bring some changes about. There's lots of things and a lot of moving parts in that, and estates and farmers were affected by some of those changes in that bill. So get together with your estate planning attorneys, make sure that they understand what some of those changes were, and figure out what you want to do moving forward with those estate plans. And then a shameless plug as we get here to the end of today's session, the Sustaining the Legacy conferences that I host November through March have been set. The dates and the locations are in stone, so to speak. Registration is open online on our events tab. So if you go to the events page and search for Legacy, you'll be able to find each of those different sessions and register. Location-wise, I'm looking at Rapid City, Mitchell, Aberdeen, Winter, and Watertown, not necessarily in that order throughout the months. So check out the event tab and you'll be able to find the location that best suits you. So seating is limited in each of those locations, so the sooner you register, the better. And we look forward to seeing you or somebody that you know at some of those sessions. So with that, any questions as we move forward for either me or for Hoanh as we wrap up the September version of the Ag Economic Dialogue sessions? I'm going to thank you all for attending. We appreciate it.